The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the United Earth Defense Command headquarters. Admiral James Walker was finishing his third cup of coffee when the emergency lights began flashing across every screen in the command center. The signal originated from deep space, carrying with it a desperate plea that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. "Please, anyone who receives this, our civilization faces extinction," the translated message read. The voice belonged to Ambassador Gray of the Stellar Alliance, a coalition of advanced alien species that humanity had never heard of until now. Their distress signal described a terrifying force sweeping through their section of the galaxy, destroying everything in its path. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Humanity, considered a primitive species by most galactic standards, was being asked for help by civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. These were species that had mastered faster-than-light travel when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. Admiral Walker stood before the United Earth Council the next day, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays showing the Stellar Alliance's desperate situation. "They're facing an enemy that uses organic technology," he explained, pointing to the grainy footage of massive, living ships that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "Their energy weapons and shields are useless against these bioships." "And why exactly are they coming to us?" asked Counselor Thomas, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Because we're the only species in this sector that still uses primitive kinetic weapons. Bullets, missiles, and good old-fashioned explosives. Their enemy has never encountered anything like our technology because it's too simple." The council chamber erupted in murmured discussions. Humanity's relatively primitive military technology, which had made them the subject of mockery among the few alien species they'd encountered before, might now be their greatest asset. "We can only spare the 7th Fleet," Walker continued. "It's our smallest and oldest collection of ships. Most are due for decommissioning next year." He paused, letting that sink in. "But those old ships carry weapons that might just save an entire civilization." The council deliberated for less than an hour before reaching their decision. Humanity would answer the call for help, but they would do it their way. The 7th Fleet, nicknamed the Rust Bucket Brigade by its own crews, would be humanity's first major contribution to galactic politics. Captain Michael Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, the flagship of the 7th Fleet. The ship was 20 years old, its hull marked with patches and repairs from countless training exercises. Around him, 30 similar vessels prepared for their first real combat mission. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," his first officer, Linda Martinez, announced. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, even as many of them held back grins at the thought of their mission. They were about to rescue some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy with ships that these same aliens would have considered fit for a museum. As the fleet prepared to depart through the newly provided jump coordinates, Reed addressed his crew. "They called us primitive. They laughed at our technology. Now they're begging for our help. Let's show them what humanity's primitive weapons can do." The 7th Fleet vanished into the jump point, leaving Earth behind. They carried with them humanity's oldest weapons and newest hopes, heading toward a battle that would prove that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would teach the galaxy that being technologically advanced didn't always mean being the most effective. Little did the advanced civilizations know that humanity's weakest fleet would soon become their strongest hope for survival. The UES Determination emerged from the jump point into chaos. Captain Reed's eyes widened at the scene before him. The massive bioships of the enemy swarmed around a crystalline space station, their organic tentacles trying to breach its shimmering shields. The station belonged to the Stellar Alliance, and its defenses were failing. Multiple energy weapon discharges detected, First Officer Martinez reported, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. The Alliance's weapons are just being absorbed by those things. The bioship surfaces rippled like living tissue, seemingly growing stronger with each hit from the advanced energy weapons. Reed watched as another Alliance vessel, sleek and beautiful like a silver arrow, fired a barrage of plasma bolts at the nearest bioship. The enemy vessel's skin simply pulsed with a sickly green light, absorbing the energy completely. "Time to show them how we do things on Earth," Reed said, his voice steady. "All ships, combat formation Delta. Load conventional warheads. Let's see how these things handle good old-fashioned explosives." The 7th Fleet moved into position, their formation looking ragged compared to the precise geometric patterns of the Alliance ships. Some of the human vessels showed visible rust spots on their hulls, and their movements weren't as graceful as their alien counterparts. But every ship was armed to the teeth with missiles, railguns, and traditional ballistic weapons. "Enemy vessels are ignoring us," Martinez observed. "They don't consider us a threat." Reed allowed himself a small smile. "That's about to change. All ships, target the largest bioship. Fire on my mark." The crew of the Determination felt the familiar shudder as the missile tubes opened. Across the fleet, 30 ships prepared their primary weapons. The Alliance vessels continued their futile attack, their crews probably wondering why the humans weren't using energy weapons like every other civilized species. Fire. The space around the 7th Fleet erupted with launch flares as hundreds of missiles streaked toward their target. The largest bioship turned too late, perhaps finally realizing that these primitive vessels might pose a threat after all. The first missile struck home. Unlike the energy weapons that the creature could absorb, the kinetic impact tore through its organic hull. The explosion ripped open a massive wound, and the following missiles poured into the gap. The bioship writhed in space, its flesh actually bleeding into the void. "Direct hits confirmed," Martinez announced, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Enemy vessel showing signs of critical damage." Through the Alliance's communication channels, surprised exclamations and shocked comments flooded in. How did they do that?" one alien commander asked. "Those are just chemical explosives." Reed opened a channel to all ships. "This is Captain Reed. Target the smaller bioships. Cruisers, use your railguns. Destroyers, continue missile barrage. Don't give them time to adapt." The battle shifted dramatically. The bioships turned their attention to the human fleet, but their usual tactics proved useless. They couldn't absorb or deflect physical projectiles like they could energy weapons. The railguns fired massive slugs of metal that tore through their organic hulls, while the missiles continued to explode inside their wounds. "Sir," Martinez called out, "the Alliance station reports their shields are at 12%. They won't hold much longer." Reed nodded. "Concentrate fire on the bioships nearest to the station. We need to buy them time to evacuate if necessary." The battle raged on, humanity's oldest weapons proving devastatingly effective against an enemy that had never needed to defend against them. The bioships began to retreat, their remaining numbers quickly realizing that these primitive vessels had turned the tide of battle. As the last enemy ship fled the system, cheers erupted across the human fleet. The Alliance station was saved, though heavily damaged. More importantly, humanity had proven that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "Message from Alliance Command, sir," Martinez said, her voice proud. "They're asking if we have more ships like these. They want to know if Earth would be willing to teach them how to build primitive weapons." Reed looked at his battered but victorious fleet. "Tell them we'd be happy to share our expertise. After all, there's something to be said for keeping things simple." 3 days after their first victory, the 7th Fleet received disturbing news. The bioships had adapted faster than anyone expected, but not in the way they feared. Instead of developing defenses against physical weapons, they had changed their strategy entirely. They were now attacking in massive swarms, overwhelming their targets with sheer numbers. Captain Reed stood in the Alliance Station's command center, studying the holographic display of recent attack patterns. Beside him, Ambassador Gray's tall, silvery form shifted nervously. "They're targeting our production facilities," the ambassador explained, his translator converting his musical language into English. "They know where your weapons hurt them, so they're trying to prevent us from building more." Reed nodded grimly. The display showed dozens of Alliance manufacturing centers reduced to debris. "They're scared of bullets and bombs. Simple as that." He pointed to a particular cluster of attacks. "But look here, they're avoiding this sector entirely." Ambassador Gray leaned forward, his large eyes blinking rapidly. "That's where your fleet is stationed. They fear you." "Not just us," Reed corrected. "They fear what we represent. Simple, physical weapons that can't be absorbed or deflected. And now they're trying to stop you from building your own." The meeting was interrupted by urgent alerts. First Officer Martinez's voice came through Reed's communicator. "Captain, we've detected a massive jump signature. It's the largest swarm yet." Reed was already moving. "How many?" "Over 200 bioships, sir. They're heading straight for the Alliance's largest shipyard. The one that just started producing ballistic weapons." The race to the shipyard became a desperate sprint through space. The Seventh Fleet pushed their aging engines to their limits, while Alliance vessels provided support with their superior speed. They arrived just as the swarm began their attack. The shipyard was massive, a sprawling complex of construction bays and material processors. Several half-finished ships hung in the scaffolding, their new weapon systems only partially installed. The bioships surrounded the complex like a cloud of angry wasps. "They're not using their usual tactics," Martinez observed. "They're sacrificing themselves to cause damage. Ramming the structures directly." Reed watched as a bioship deliberately crashed into a construction bay, its massive body exploding on impact. "They've learned that taking damage is inevitable against our weapons. So they're making it count." He keyed the fleet-wide comm, "all ships, defensive formation around the central manufacturing hub. That's where they're building our weapons. We hold that position at all costs." The battle that followed was unlike anything in human military history. The bioships attacked in waves, seemingly endless. Each destroyed vessel was replaced by two more. The Seventh Fleet's guns blazed continuously, their ammunition supplies dwindling with each passing hour. "Port-side missile tubes empty on 5 ships, Martinez reported. "Railgun ammunition at 40% fleet-wide." Reed gripped his command chair as another impact rocked the ship. "Have the Alliance vessels concentrate on hurting them into our firing solutions. We make every shot count." The strategy worked, for a time. Alliance ships used their superior maneuverability to channel the bioships into killing zones, where human weapons could tear them apart efficiently. But the swarm seemed endless. "Sir," Martinez called out, reading new jump signatures. It's the Alliance ships we helped retrofit with ballistic weapons." Through the viewport, Reed watched as dozens of Alliance vessels emerged from jump points, their newly installed railguns and missile tubes adding fresh firepower to the defense. The sleek alien ships, now bristling with primitive human weapons, turned the tide of battle. Hours later, as the last bioships retreated or were destroyed, Reed received a message from Ambassador Gray. "Captain, what we witnessed today will be remembered in Alliance history as the day we learned that progress doesn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes, it means remembering what worked in the past." The Seventh Fleet had not just defended the shipyard, they had proven that humanity's contribution to galactic warfare would reshape the future of space combat. As Reed looked at his battered but victorious ships, he knew that the war was far from over, but now they had a real chance of winning it. 2 weeks after defending the shipyard, the Alliance made a terrifying discovery. One of their research stations picked up strange readings from the destroyed bioships. They were evolving even after death. Their organic remains were breaking down and transmitting information back to their hive through unknown means. It's like they're learning from their defeats, Dr. Alan Peters, Earth's leading xenobiologist, explained to Captain Reed and Ambassador Gray. The three stood in the Determinations lab, examining tissue samples. Each destroyed ship sends data about what killed it. They're trying to develop countermeasures. Reed frowned at the pulsing sample under the microscope. How long until they adapt to our weapons? That's the interesting part, Peters said, adjusting his glasses. They can't. Physical damage is physical damage. They can't evolve their way around a bullet or an explosion. But they're trying something else entirely. The doctor pulled up a hologram showing the latest bioship formations. See these new structures growing on their hulls? They're developing launching mechanisms. I think they're going to try to beat us at our own game. Ambassador Gray's translator crackled with concern. They're creating their own projectile weapons? Organic ones, Peters confirmed. Living missiles, essentially. But they're rushing the evolution. Forcing it. And that might be their weakness. Reed leaned forward. Explain. Rushed evolution is unstable. These new weapons they're growing, they're unreliable. Dangerous to the ships carrying them. We've got maybe 3 days before they figure out how to stabilize the process. The captain straightened up. Then we attack in 2. Get me Admiral Walker. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. The 7th Fleet, now reinforced with Alliance ships equipped with human weapons, prepared for their biggest offensive yet. Intelligence suggested the bioships were gathering in a nearby system, preparing their new weapons. All ships report ready, Martinez announced on the morning of the attack. The fleet had grown to over 100 vessels, a mix of human and Alliance designs, all armed with primitive but proven weapons. Reed addressed the combined fleet. The enemy thinks they can copy our technology, improve upon it. But they're forgetting something fundamental. We've had centuries to perfect these weapons. They're trying to replicate that in days. Let's show them why that's a mistake. The fleet jumped into the enemy system, emerging into a scene straight out of Earth's worst nightmares. Hundreds of bioships hung in space, their hulls now covered in grotesque organic launchers. The new growths pulsed with sickly light, clearly unstable. Enemy ships are powering their weapon systems. Martinez reported. Their dash. She never finished the sentence. The first bioship to fire its new weapons exploded spectacularly, its rushed evolution backfiring catastrophically. The organic missiles detonated inside their launchers, ripping the ship apart from the inside. All ships, open fire. Reed commanded. Don't let them stabilize. The battle became a race against time. Human and Alliance ships poured conventional fire into the bioship fleet, while more and more enemy vessels destroyed themselves trying to use their unstable new weapons. The space around them filled with the bizarre sight of bioships being torn apart by their own evolutionary mistakes. They're retreating. Martinez called out after an hour of chaos. Multiple ships self-destructing as they try to jump. Reed watched as the enemy fleet collapsed into disarray. Sometimes, he mused, trying to copy something you don't understand is more dangerous than sticking to what you know. The victory was decisive, but Reed knew the war wasn't over. The bioships would try something else, adapt in a new way. But for now, humanity's primitive technology had proven once again that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. After their failed attempt to copy human weapons, the bioships disappeared. For 3 tense weeks, the combined Human Alliance fleet patrolled the borders of Alliance space, waiting for the next attack. But when it finally came, it wasn't what anyone expected. Captain Reed to the bridge. First Officer Martinez's voice carried an urgency that made Reed run from his quarters. When he arrived, she pointed to the main display. "Sir, we're picking up a distress signal. It's from an Alliance research vessel." The signal showed the small science ship drifting at the edge of a nebula. It had been studying the remains of the bioships from their last battle when something went wrong. "Play the message," Reed ordered. A panicked Alliance scientist appeared on screen. "This is Research Vessel Explorer. We've made a terrible discovery. The bioships, they're not what we thought. They're not autonomous. They're being controlled. There's something inside the nebula, something massive." The transmission cut off abruptly. Dr. Peters rushed onto the bridge, his lab coat askew. "Captain, you need to see this." He connected his tablet to the main screen. "We've been analyzing the tissue samples wrong. These aren't just ships, they're extensions. Like fingers on a hand." Reed's blood ran cold. Extensions of what? Something ancient. Something that's been sleeping in that nebula for maybe millions of years. The Alliance's energy weapons probably woke it up. That's why it started attacking. Ambassador Gray, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "The nebula has always been considered sacred space in our histories. Our ancestors left warnings never to disturb it." Reed studied the sensor readings. The nebula churned with strange energy patterns, unlike anything they'd seen before. If these bioships are just extensions, then destroying them was never going to win this war. "We need to find the source." The determination led a small scouting group into the nebula. The gas clouds were thick, making both sensors and visibility nearly useless. They had to rely on old-fashioned compass readings, like ancient sailors navigating through fog. "Energy readings are off the charts," Martinez reported. "Something big is in here with us." Suddenly, the nebula lit up around them. A massive shape moved in the darkness, larger than anything humans had ever encountered. The bioships weren't just extensions, they were cells in comparison to this entity. "Dear God," Reed whispered. The creature was the size of a small moon, a living mass of organic tissue that pulsed with inner light. Tentacles larger than the largest Alliance battleships stretched out into space. "Sir." Martinez's voice shook. It's trying to communicate." The creature broadcast directly into their minds, its ancient consciousness touching theirs. Through the contact, they learned the truth. It was a guardian, placed there eons ago to protect this sector of space from a long-forgotten threat. The Alliance's energy weapons had disturbed its slumber, and it reacted defensively, seeing their advanced technology as a potential threat. "It doesn't understand our weapons," Dr. Peters realized. "They're too simple, too basic for it to perceive as dangerous. That's why they worked." Reed made a decision. He opened a channel to the fleet waiting outside the nebula. "All ships, hold position. I'm going to try something." He turned to Ambassador Gray. "Can you help me project my thoughts? Show it we're not its enemy?" The next few minutes were tense as Reed and Gray attempted to communicate with the ancient being. They showed it memories of the Alliance, of Earth, of peaceful cooperation. Most importantly, they showed it that the threat it was created to fight no longer existed. The creature's response was felt rather than heard. A sense of understanding, followed by something like relief. The bioships still in the sector began to retreat, returning to their source. As they left the nebula, Reed knew they had achieved something remarkable. They hadn't just won a war, they had made first contact with something beyond their comprehension. And once again, it was humanity's simplicity that had made the difference. The discovery of the ancient guardian changed everything. Over the next few days, the combined fleet maintained a safe distance while Dr. Peters and Ambassador Gray worked with other scientists to establish better communication with the creature. Captain Reed stood in the Determination's conference room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Guardian's massive form. Admiral Walker's image appeared on the main screen, transmitted from Earth. "Let me get this straight," Walker said, rubbing his temples. "This thing was placed here millions of years ago by an advanced civilization to guard against some ancient threat?" "Yes, sir," Reed confirmed. "And our primitive weapons worked because they were too simple for it to register as dangerous. It was programmed to watch for advanced energy weapons, the kind that could actually harm it." The Admiral laughed quietly. "So we won because we weren't advanced enough to be a threat. That's something." Dr. Peters stepped forward, excitement clear in his voice. "It's more than that, sir. The Guardian has access to technology and knowledge beyond anything we've ever seen. And it's willing to share." Through their mental connection, the Guardian had revealed glimpses of its creator's civilization. They were beings of pure energy who had ascended beyond physical form thousands of millennia ago. They left the Guardian behind to protect younger races from their own mistakes, to prevent them from developing weapons that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. The Alliance's energy weapons, Ambassador Gray explained, his silver form shimmering in the holographic light, they were accidentally approaching the threshold of what could wake such weapons. The Guardian reacted to protect us from ourselves. Reed watched as new data streamed across the screens. The Guardian was teaching them, showing them safer paths to advance their technology. Ways to progress that wouldn't risk awakening ancient dangers. "There's something else," Martinez added, bringing up a new display. "The Guardian has shown us what it was truly protecting. There are tears in space. Places where previous civilizations' weapons damaged the universe itself. It prevents anyone from approaching these areas." Admiral Walker leaned forward in his chair. "And now it wants our help?" "Yes," Reed answered. "Because of our simple weapons and technology, we can approach these tiers safely. The Guardian wants to teach us how to help repair them." The implications were staggering. Humanity, considered primitive by the Alliance, was being offered the chance to help heal wounds in the fabric of spacetime itself. Their very backwardness made them perfect for the task. "The Guardian has also requested something specific," Ambassador Gray added. "It wants the 7th Fleet to remain here, to help protect this sector. Our primitive weapons make us ideal guardians against any advanced civilizations that might accidentally approach the danger zones." Reed couldn't help but smile. The fleet of old ships that everyone had written off as obsolete was now being requested as a permanent protective force by one of the most advanced beings in the galaxy. "There's a certain poetry to it," Walker mused. "Our oldest ships, our simplest weapons, turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed." Over the next few hours, arrangements were made. The 7th Fleet would remain as guardians, working alongside the ancient being. The Alliance would continue to develop their technology, but now with guidance to prevent them from approaching dangerous thresholds. As Reed looked out at the nebula where the Guardian dwelled, he thought about how strange the universe was. Humanity had been called primitive, backwards, stuck in the past. Yet here they were, chosen for a task of cosmic importance precisely because of those qualities. "Sometimes," he said to Martinez as they watched the nebula pulse with ancient energy, "the old ways aren't just the best ways. They're the only ways that work." The 7th Fleet had started this mission expecting to save a civilization. Instead, they had found their true purpose, helping to protect the very fabric of space itself, all because they kept things simple. 1 year after the discovery of the Guardian, the 7th Fleet had settled into its new role. The old ships, once nicknamed the Rust Bucket Brigade, were now known throughout the galaxy as the Wardens of the Void. Captain Reed stood on the Determination's observation deck, watching his fleet patrol the nebula's edges. The ships looked different now. Their hulls still showed signs of age, but they wore their battle scars with pride. Each vessel had been modified with special sensors provided by the Guardian, allowing them to detect approaching ships and warn them away from the dangerous tears in space. Message from the Alliance Diplomatic Corps, Sir, Martinez called from her station. The last of the dangerous energy weapon programs has been shut down. All member species have adopted the new safety protocols. Reed nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. The Guardian's warnings had changed how the galaxy approached technological development. Advanced wasn't always better, that was the lesson humanity had helped teach the stars. Dr. Peters entered the observation deck, carrying his ever-present tablet. Captain, you're going to want to see this. The Guardian just shared something remarkable with us. The scientist brought up a holographic display showing what looked like a star map, but different. It showed tears in spacetime scattered throughout the galaxy, each one marked with a small dot. There are other Guardians, Peters explained, his voice filled with wonder. Other ancient beings protecting other damaged sectors of space. And they're requesting human fleets to help them too. Reed studied the map carefully. How many? 12 sectors, each with its own Guardian. The Alliance has already offered to help Earth reactivate more of our mothballed ships. They're even offering to build new ones to our specifications, simple, reliable, and compatible with Guardian technology. Outside the viewport, a massive tentacle of the Guardian gently moved past, acknowledging their presence. Over the past year, the crew had grown used to these displays. The ancient being had become something between a commanding officer and a teacher. We've received the first group of cadets from the Alliance Academy, Martinez added. They're here to learn primitive warfare as they're calling it. Though they mean it as a compliment now. Reed smiled at that. The 7th Fleet had become a training ground for alien species learning to appreciate the value of simplicity. Young officers from across the galaxy now competed for spots on human vessels, eager to learn what they called the old ways. Ambassador Gray arrived on the bridge, his silver form now adorned with a human naval insignia, a symbol of his permanent assignment to the fleet. The Guardian has made another request, he announced. It wants us to begin healing the first tear. This was what they had been preparing for. Using a combination of human ingenuity and the Guardian's guidance, they had developed tools that could slowly repair the damage done to spacetime by ancient weapons. All ships, battle stations, Reed ordered, though there would be no battle today. The phrase had become tradition, a reminder of how they started. Prepare for void-sealing operations. The 7th Fleet moved into position around the nearest tear, their simple weapons now converted into tools of restoration. The Guardian's tentacles gently guided them, showing them exactly where to direct their efforts. As the first healing beams engaged, Reed thought about the strange path that had brought them here. They had been sent out as Earth's weakest fleet, expected to fail. Instead, they had found humanity's true calling among the stars. Sometimes, he said to no one in particular, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. The tear in space began to close, responding to their efforts. Around them, the Guardian pulsed with approval. The 7th Fleet had started their journey as obsolete ships barely worth mentioning. They would end it as legends, teaching the galaxy that true advancement sometimes meant remembering the wisdom of the past. In the end, humanity's greatest weakness had become its greatest strength. And somewhere out there, 11 other Guardians waited, ready to teach this lesson to other parts of the galaxy.